In today's video, we're gonna build a ground level deck. This video is gonna cover everything from site prep to the Bison Level Up pedestal system, which we're gonna use to support our joists, all the way to composite decking and fascia board installation. So let's get into it.
So here's where we're going to be building the ground level deck, and
as you can see, it's pretty unimpressive, and yes, I know, I gotta do something about that, I get it. I want this ground level deck to go all the way to the edge of my house right here. This will be the width, and then the length is gonna match the existing deck. So I think we have about 14 feet right here, and we also have around 14 feet to the end of the deck right here. And I gotta move. There's literally sirens all the time these days. I gotta get out of here.
So I'm gonna put in a couple stakes so I can use a string line to mark the 14 by 14 foot layout.
The next stake is gonna go right on the corner of the house. And then our last stake is gonna go 14 feet away from there. And also 14 feet away from here. So where these intersect, that's where we're gonna stop.
And this string line is just gonna give me a rough estimate so that I know where to excavate. It's not gonna be a perfect square, and it doesn't need to be at this stage.
I'm gonna be using a compacted stone base as the foundation for this deck. So I first gotta excavate down around 2 to 3 inches so that I have room to put that stone in.
So I've done a ton of hand excavation in the past.
But I only have one day to complete this excavation, so I splurged and I rented this little Ditch Witch mini skid steer. Let's see how it goes.
So I've been doing projects like this by hand for years, but I just recently got into this whole equipment rental game, and oh my gosh, it is a game changer, worth every penny. Rented a mini excavator for the outdoor shower I built for my mom. Highly recommend.
Okay, here's a look with everything excavated down around 2 to 3 inches. And now we just need to compact everything. And instead of hand tamping like I've done for almost all the other projects like this, I rented this plate compactor, which is gonna make everything so much easier.
And I mean, come on, you think I'm gonna rent a mini skid steer and not throw on the bonus plate compactor? I mean, come on. I may be stupid, but I ain't dumb.
All right, now that the soil is compacted, we're gonna add 2 to 3 inches of stone and then compact that again.
So I needed around 2 cubic yards to fill this 14 by 14 foot square with around 2 inches of stone. This is just 57 stone, and I obviously had that delivered the same day I had the mini skid steer so that I could put that in place without breaking my back with a wheelbarrow. But the stone was in the front yard, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I caught quite a few interesting looks going back and forth about 20 times with this skid steer. So if you have some nosy neighbors, they're probably gonna come over and ask you what the heck you're doing, or they may just report you to the city, which is what I think happened when I built the gable porch overhang in my front yard. I don't have any proof, but I'm thinking it was foul play. I'm going with that. I'm sticking with that. I think I was reported. And once all the stone was in the backyard, I raked it around as needed.
So as we get the stone in here, it's a good idea to make sure you're relatively level. You don't need to be perfect, but you want to be close.
And once it's pretty uniform, run that plate compactor over one more time to compact all the stone.
So I want my new deck to be in line with my existing deck. So I'm setting a stake right there, which is completely even with this deck. Then I place the stake in the corner because I want this deck to end right at the corner of my house. Next, I'm just gonna eyeball this corner stake here, and then we're gonna adjust it using the 3-4-5 method to make sure that we're square. Here's our line. I'll go ahead and pull this tight for now, and then we'll square it. So for the 3-4-5 method, I'm gonna go 4 feet over on the wall here. Then we're gonna go 3 feet over on this line. So we'll mark that right at 3. And then we're gonna measure the distance between this green and this green and adjust it until we're right at 5.
So for our first attempt here, we were just under 5 feet, so I had to adjust that line just a little bit, and after double checking, we were right at that 5, so pretty confident that we're square in that corner. And after repeating that process in the other corners, I marked the perimeter.
So for our ground level deck footers, we're using the Bison Level Up system, and I'm super pumped because that means we don't have to pour concrete footers. Here's how you put it together. First, you're gonna take your floating foundation base. Next, you're gonna take your slope leveler with the flat side down. Next, we're gonna take our adjustable deck pedestal, put that on top there. And finally, we're gonna take our joist top attachment and put that right there. Next, using the provided hardware, we're gonna secure the joist top attachment to the pedestal below, just like that.
And I need about 24 of these for the deck that I'm building, spacing them every 16 inches on center, so I had quite a bit of assembling to do, but it really didn't take all that long.
Real quick, I want to mention that you can install the Bison Level Up system on compacted dirt. I just like the idea of stone, one, because I feel like it's easier to level, and I also feel like it gives you better compaction and better drainage.
Now we just got to set our 2 rows of pedestals, build our deck framing, and then install the composite boards over top. Now to position these pedestals, you want to mark an 8x8 box in the corner and center the first pedestal on the corner of that box. Next, we're going to use a torpedo level to make sure that we're perfectly level in both planes. You can use up to 4 slope levelers to account for up to an 8% slope, and it's a little bit iterative to move things around, adjust the slope leveler as needed, but eventually you'll get it level. After getting the first pedestal set and level, place the rest of the pedestals 16 inches on center. Then adjust the slope leveler to make sure you're level for all the remaining pedestals. Depending on the size of your deck, you're going to have to do this quite a few times, but trust me, it's better than digging footers. With all the pedestals level, let's get them all at the same height. To do this, place a 6-foot level across a few pedestals and twist the adjustable pedestal base until you get it at the right height and everything is uniform. And after double checking everything, it's time to move on to row B. But before setting row B, I'm going to cut all of my joists to the right length, and you'll see why in just a second. I use this span chart, and for my deck, I use 2x10s based on the span I was working with. Now, because row A is dictating the height of this deck, I'm going to use a joist right here and adjust the pedestal height of row B to make sure that I'm perfectly level. In our case here, row B needs to be a bit higher, so I removed the joists, I adjusted the pedestal to give myself a little extra height, and after double checking, I can confidently say that row A and row B are at the same height. And now that we have the height of the first pedestal established, it's just a matter of spacing the rest of the pedestals 16 inches on center and then adjusting the height to match that first pedestal. And overall, this was a pretty straightforward deck application, but Bison also makes a bunch of accessories if you have a larger delta between row A and row B, or you need additional slope compensation. And before placing the deck joist, we want to make sure the crown side is up, and the crown is the slight upward arching curvature when sighting down the board. Next, we're going to mark a line 6.5 inches from the end of the joist, and when you place your joist on the pedestals, that line should be right in the center of the pedestal. And because my deck's up against the house, I just cut that piece of blocking at the back so it's perfect every time.
And then once we have it positioned properly, we're going to fold up the flaps
And put in 2 screws per connection using exterior rated number 8 1¼ inch screws. Connect each joist to both pedestals on either side of the deck and repeat this process for all the remaining joists.
Okay, so we have all the middle joists in. Now we just need to install this joist, which is on the end, and then the joist on the other side here. So for the outermost joist, we need to install this framing angle. So we'll go ahead and visually center it right here, and then we're gonna attach it using some Simpson strong tie fasteners right here.
And after attaching those framing angles to the end of each board, we're gonna position them in place on the pedestals just like we did for all the rest. And then I'm gonna secure the joist using the pedestal mounting brackets.
And you're not gonna be able to put this one on because of the framing bracket, so don't worry about that.
Just make sure you secure the 3 other locations.
Okay, now it's finally time to install the rim joist.
And this rim joist was cut to overhang each side of the deck by around 8 inches. I'm going to use a bar clamp to preliminarily hold one side in place while I lift the other side of the rim joist in place and secure it with another bar clamp.
And once we have it positioned where we like it, we're going to take a 3-inch screw and we're going to put 3 of these in through the rim joist and into our actual joist. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side once we have it positioned where we want it. Now all we got to do is put 3 screws into all the remaining joists. And if some of the joists are a little bit higher than the rim joist, just take a bar clamp, plop it on, and then you should usually be able to lift this and get it pretty flush. All right, now we got to install the rim joist up by the house, but this is going to be 10 times harder because it's up by the house.
And because we don't have access to the backside of the rim joist because of the house, we got to secure the rim joist using the framing angle. And I had to install these framing angles on every single joist that was on the house side of the deck. And this was painful. This was like not getting all the groceries in one trip, because I knew if I had a couple guys to help me, we could have assembled this a couple feet away from the final location, screwed it in just like we did for the other rim joist, and then lifted the whole assembly into place. But I was working alone, so this is what I had to do. And we don't have a supporting pedestal, obviously, for the last joist here. So again, we're using framing angles and a bar clamp to hold everything and secure it.
Okay, so at this point, we have all of the joists secured, giving it a quick test right here. A little wobbly in some places, but once we put the blocking in, which is the next step, that should lock everything in together and make it a little bit more secure. So I'm gonna measure each piece of blocking individually, write those down, and then take it over to the miter saw and make all my cuts at once.
And for the blocking, I'm just using the cut-off ends of the joists. This is again 2x10 pressure-treated lumber, cutting them to size and then securing them with 2 screws at each connection point, using a stair-step or staggered pattern so that I have access to actually screw the blocking in on both sides.
Okay, now that we finally have the deck framed, let's put on some joist tape to kind of waterproof these joists a little bit more and hopefully add about 5 or 10 years of longevity to the deck. Since the lifespan of pressure-treated lumber is only around 30 years, but composite decking is around 50 years, this joist tape is hopefully going to get us closer to that 50-year lifetime of the composite decking. And speaking of composite decking, we're using the Trex Enhanced Basics. This is the clamshell color, and it's the exact same decking that I used on my upper deck. And all of these tools and materials will be linked in the video description. And after securing the outermost deck board, position the hidden fasteners at each joist location, and then sandwich the fasteners in between the two boards so that the fastener is in between the grooves like this. Then you're just going to screw each of the fasteners down and repeat this process over and over again. And this tool right here is super helpful if you're working alone. It gives you the leverage to pull the next board into the board you installed before that one. So if you're working alone, highly recommend it. I'll link it down in the video description. It really helps to make sure that all your boards are as tight up against each other as they need to be. I needed to install about 30 of these composite decking boards, and this took a couple hours despite this time lapse making it seem like it took about 10 minutes. So it always takes longer and is a little bit more difficult than it looks on YouTube. And you may have noticed that I left all of the boards a bit long, and that was because I wasn't going to cut each one of them individually. It's going to be way faster if I snap a chalk line here and establish some kind of ledger board and cut them all at once using a circular saw. Obviously, a track saw is the best tool for this, but I don't own a track saw, so I'm just using a 2x10 as a guide. Now, because there's more than a 4-inch gap between the joist and the ground, I need some skirting reinforcement, and this would have been 10 times easier if I remember to do this before I put the decking boards on. Now, for the deck skirting, I'm using more of the Trex clamshell, except this is solid plank that doesn't have the grooves on the end, and I'm cutting it at a 45-degree miter in the corner and then securing those boards in place to give us a nice tight miter. And this was honestly a nightmare trying to do this by myself, holding the other side while trying to make sure those miters were tight. If anybody has a tip on how to do this alone, let me know, but having someone to help you for this step, highly recommend it. And because the length of the boards was only 8 feet, I was going to have butt joints, but instead of having them just butt up against each other, I cut 45s for those as well. And to cover up the very bottom, I bought this 4x8 sheet of PVC trim. It was cheaper than buying the individual pieces, and ripped it down to around 12 inches or so, painted all of the strips black, and then installed them with a few screws here and there. Now let's take a quick reminder look at where this project started. And here's a look at the final result. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this deck project turned out. Once we get some furniture on there and get some grass growing, I think it's going to look even better. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like down below and subscribe for more DIY content. And thanks again to Bison for providing the adjustable deck pedestals for this project. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.